This time last year, the world was discussing a letter written by Donald Trump to Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The US president called the Turkish president a fool. Now the Turkish president is calling the French president mental. I'm not making this up. Listen to it from the horse's mouth.
Macron'un zihinsel noktada bir tedaviye ihtiyacı var. İnanç hürriyetinden, inanç özgürlüğünden anlamayan ve kendi ülkesinde yaşayan milyonlarca farklı inanç mensubu insanlara bu şekilde davranan bir devlet başkanına başka ne denilebilir? Öncelikle bir akli noktadan kontrol.
That was the Turkish president calling the French president names. Erdogan said Macron needs mental treatment. While nothing justifies such language, what was the trigger for this outburst? Macron's crackdown on radical Islam. The French president has pledged to defend the secular values of his country, and the Turkish president can't seem to take it. Why is it any of his business? Because Erdogan thinks he is the leader of all Muslims in the world. We'll come to that in a bit, but first let's tell you what is happening in France. President Macron has refused to ban cartoons of Prophet Muhammad. He wants to reform Islam in his country. He wants to root out extremists. His decisions have triggered an Islamic backlash. The Arab world is boycotting French products. The Muslim world is calling Macron the devil. It's the #1 trend, by the way, on social media in India. Macron the devil. And leaders like Turkey's Erdogan and Pakistan's Imran Khan are hurling abuses at the French president. They're calling him an Islamophobe. Our cover story tonight is about a leader who is fighting extremism and being trolled for it. On this show, we've always lauded Macron's approach. Instead of playing safe, pandering to a vote bank and being politically correct, he's chosen the tougher path. He's called Islam a religion in crisis and he's set out to fix it. This month, France suffered one of its most horrific terror attacks, the beheading of a teacher in broad daylight. But well before this attack, France had begun scrutinizing Islam. The president had announced a law to regulate Islam, make the religion more compatible with French secularism. He wanted to rein in the radicals. After the beheading, he intensified the crackdown, and now he's facing a backlash. Leading the charge against Macron is the president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, hurling insults at his French counterpart. Listen in.
Fransa'nın başındaki zat şaşırmış. Yatıyor, kalkıyor, Erdoğan'la uğraşıyor. Ya önce sen kendine bir bak. Nereye gidiyorsun bir ona bak. Dün Kayseri'de de söyledim. Bu bir vaka. Onun için bir hakikaten kontrolden geçmesi lazım.
That was the Turkish president implying that the French president is mentally unfit for office. He did it not once but twice. How did France respond? It hasn't taken the insult lying down. France has recalled its ambassador in Ankara. But the backlash has been extreme and widespread. Since Friday, people across the world have taken to social media to criticize President Macron. He's been slammed. Groups and individuals in the United Kingdom, Kuwait, Qatar, Palestine, Egypt, Algeria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and of course, Turkey. 3 hashtags are targeting the French government and President Macron. Boycott French products, Islam, and never the Prophet in Arabic. And it's not just online. There are protests on the streets too. In Libya, protesters burned the French flag and portraits of the French president. In Jordan, people are boycotting French goods. Supermarkets have taken French products off the shelves. Some shops have put up signs that say, and I'm quoting, "In solidarity with Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, all French products are boycotted." The list of countries and regions that witnessed protests is rather long. In a span of just a few days, we have received pictures from Gaza, Bangladesh, Qatar, Libya, Israel and more. Leaders like Erdogan are riding this wave, whipping up the anti-France rhetoric.
İkinci Dünya Savaşı öncesinde Avrupa'daki Musevilere karşı yürütülen linç kampanyasının bir benzerine bugün Müslümanlar maruz kalıyor.
In Pakistan, Prime Minister Imran Khan faces massive countrywide protests against his own government. But he took to social media to say what? To accuse Macron of polarization, to accuse the French president of marginalization of Muslims. How is Macron taking all of this? He says he's undeterred by the criticism. Let me quote his statement. "We will not give in ever. We respect all differences in a spirit of peace. We do not accept hate speech and defend reasonable debate. We will always be on the side of human dignity and universal values." France is at an inflection point. The beheading of school teacher Samuel Paty has brought home the threat of radical Islam in this country. 3 weeks back, Macron made an admission. He said the French government was at fault. It had allowed Islamism to spread. And now the government must do something about it. France, by the way, has the largest Muslim population in Western Europe. They make up 9% of the country's population. That's almost 6 million people. Macron took office in 2017, right after 2 major terror attacks in his country. I'm talking about the 2015 Paris attack and the 2016 truck ramming in Nice. France has also contributed the largest contingent of foreign fighters in Syria. These are French radicals who fight for the Islamic State. According to one estimate, some 2,000 fighters joined ISIS from France. These numbers are worrying. This year, the French Interior Minister said France faces a quote-unquote extremely high risk of terror attacks. In the month of August, more than 8,000 people were on a national warning list. This was a list of Islamic radicals, 8,000 people. The need for crackdown and reform is urgent. Macron is doing the right thing. He says he's designing an Islam for France. The new law will keep madrasas in check. It will impose stringent limits on homeschooling, keep children out of madrasas. Public funding will also be monitored. Groups that collect money will be asked to sign a charter on secularism. And foreign imams will not be welcome in France. It used to be a widespread practice. These proposals are radical and long overdue. What Macron does in France may well set the template for Europe and the rest of the world. The global protest by a certain section is only proof that he's hitting them where it hurts the most. So what is driving, or who rather, is driving these boycott calls and insults? The French crackdown on radical Islam, the beheading of a teacher in Paris, that has proved to be a breaking point. The government of France is now leaving no stone unturned in its crackdown on extremists. Here's a report.
The operation to hunt the terrorist who beheaded a teacher in Paris. Within hours of the attack, its perpetrator was gunned down. French President Emmanuel Macron has taken a vow to protect French citizens against extremism.
Our citizens today must be protected. Our citizens whose religion is Islam must be protected in our country against the evil which is radical Islam. I say it here because the will of its Islamists, the will of its ideologists, is precisely to turn a part of our citizens because of their religion against the Republic, and we cannot let that happen.
The beheading of schoolteacher Samuel Paty has shaken up France. It showed that radical Islam is very much alive in France, and it poses a major threat to French national security. The Macron government has now begun a relentless campaign to crack down on extremists. At least 15 people have been taken into custody after the beheading. This includes 4 school students and 4 family members of the terrorist. It is believed that the terrorists had asked some students to identify Paty, the slain teacher who had shown cartoons of the Prophet in his class. Almost a week ago, a mosque was closed. The Grand Mosque of Pantin will remain shut for 6 months because this mosque had shared a video on its Facebook page where a parent had called Samuel Paty a thug.
I've asked the Saint Saint-Denis prefect to order the closure of the Pantin Mosque because its leader shared the message that said that this teacher should be intimidated and also shared the address of the middle school on social media.
A domestic Islamist group has been directly implicated in the attack. It is called the Collective Sheikh Yassin. It's named after a slain leader of the Palestinian Hamas. While the French government hasn't offered any specifics, the French cabinet dissolved the group last week. In the last 2 weeks, dozens of raids have been carried out in France. Muslim individuals and groups accused of radicalism have been their target. More than 200 others have been threatened with expulsion. French President Emmanuel Macron has found fresh momentum to push his bill to tackle extremism. His government has plans to formally present the proposed law in December. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
So the French president is cracking down on Islamic extremists. The Islamic world is up in arms, and two leaders are seeing this as an opportunity to position themselves as custodians of the Islamic faith. Two men who are whipping up anti-France rhetoric because it suits their domestic political narrative. Who are these two men? The usual suspects: Imran Khan and Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the mentee and the mentor. We've done several reports on their unholy alliance in recent weeks. But now it's out in the open, as they publicly make personal attacks and humiliate Emmanuel Macron for his actions, their own record on terror, extremism and persecution notwithstanding. Let's burst their bubble one more time. I'll start with the Turkish president. He thinks the world revolves around him. He thinks Emmanuel Macron goes to bed thinking about him and wakes up again to find himself thinking about him. Listen to this one more time.
What is the problem of this person called Macron? What's his problem with Islam and Muslims? Macron needs mental health treatment. What else can be said about a head of a state who does not understand freedom of belief and who behaves in this way to millions of people living in his country who are members of a different faith? First of all, a mental examination is very necessary. The person in charge of France has lost his way. He goes on about Erdogan while in bed and while he's awake. Look at yourself first. Look where you're headed. As I said yesterday, he's a case and he really must be examined.
He has lost his way. He is a case. He must be examined, and he does not understand freedom of belief. Says a leader who has deprived Turkey's 15 million Kurds of their constitutional rights. A leader who is using medieval score settling to justify the conversion of museums and cathedrals into mosques. A leader who is chasing new conquests and provoking his neighbors in complete violation of international law. A leader who is sending Syrian mercenaries in Azerbaijan to wage a proxy war against Armenia. And a leader who has betrayed thousands of Uyghur Muslims being persecuted by the Chinese regime. In fact, Erdogan sends Uyghur refugees back to China. Forget standing up for them, he's sending Muslims back to their tormentors. The moral authority with which Erdogan lectures others and calls them a mental case is astonishing. What's even more astonishing is the self-righteous statements being made by his ally, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan Niazi. He claims to be deeply hurt by some of Macron's recent decisions. So Imran Khan decided to provide a crash course to Macron on how to be a good leader of all things. He put out 4 sanctimonious tweets. The first line of the first tweet itself could not have been more ironic. Imran Khan said, and I quote, "Hallmark of a leader is that he unites human beings, as Mandela did, rather than dividing them." A puppet prime minister talking about leadership and Mandela. Could it have been more absurd? In Pakistan, yes. Look at the next post. Imran Khan said the French president had, quote-unquote, attacked and hurt the sentiments of millions of Muslims across the world. Attacked and hurt the sentiments of Muslims. Now here's the thing. China has attacked and killed thousands of Muslims. Forget hurting their sentiments. China has destroyed their places of worship, put Uyghur men in concentration camps, subjected Uyghur women to state-sanctioned rape. Uyghur children are being forced to memorize communist principles. The Chinese regime has been accused of genocide of its Muslims. What lessons in leadership does Imran Khan have for his iron brother Xi Jinping? None.
What's your stance on China's treatment of Uyghur Muslims?
Frankly, I don't know much about that. If I had enough knowledge, I would speak about it.
I do not know the exact situation of this.
I would never talk about it in public.
We talk to them privately. We don't make public statements. We do not talk about things with China in public right now because they're very sensitive. That's how they deal with issues.
He's right. He should not talk. Imran Khan should be the last person talking about Nelson Mandela. Erdogan, the last person complaining about freedom of belief. They may like to think of themselves as custodians of the Islamic faith, but their selective activism for the rights of Muslims has been exposed repeatedly. If they're fooling anybody with their selective outrage against France, it is only themselves. This is going to be an eventful week in Asia. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has kicked off his 4-nation tour. He's begun with India, while the Communist Party of China is holding its plenary right after China sanctioned leading defense companies of the US for supplying arms to Taiwan. There is a lot brewing. In the next 5 days, we could witness the birth of new alliances that could have a fundamental impact on India's foreign policy. Our next report tells you more.
Just a week to go for the presidential election. It is rare for top US leaders to travel abroad at this time. But China's aggression will not wait for America's elections. So, Washington is reaching out to Asian allies, starting with India. It is called the 2+2 dialogue. 2 ministers from each side participate. The foreign and defense ministers of India and the US. They will sit down for talks on Tuesday. In New Delhi, the American leaders have landed. In Beijing, China's Communist Party is holding its plenary session. Was the timing a coincidence? The world is watching both the events. India and America have made an announcement. They will sign BECA, the Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement. It is a military pact. It will give India access to advanced American map and satellite imagery. This will help automated weapons, drones, and missiles. Satellite images will enhance their accuracy. The agreement will also pave the way for the US to ship sophisticated missile technology to India. Reports say US Defense Secretary Mark Esper could also discuss ways to increase cooperation between American and Indian forces. Esper's wish list could include intelligence sharing, stepping up joint exercises, and arms sale. Meanwhile, in Beijing, the Communist Party has a 4-day-long plenary. They are expected to lay out long-term plans, approve new rules for the Central Committee, a political body of the top leadership in China. More powers could be given to the Central Committee. This is basically more power in the hands of Xi Jinping. What does it mean for the world? A more aggressive China. Beijing is already upping the ante against Washington. China has sanctioned American defense companies like Lockheed Martin, Boeing Defense and Raytheon for selling weapons to Taiwan. The United States is arming Taiwan as threats from China grow. The PLA has raised the threat of war by stepping up drills and activities near Taiwan, at the border with India, and in the South China Sea. The United States is building an alliance to counter China. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will visit more allies on his trip to Asia. His next stops include Sri Lanka and the Maldives, followed by Indonesia, one of the 6 countries contesting China's expansive claims in the South China Sea. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Meanwhile, in some countries, women are still fighting the most primitive of battles. I'm talking about Poland. The country's top judicial body has struck down one of the most common legal grounds for abortion. Abortion due to fetal defects has been declared unconstitutional in Poland. The decision has divided the entire country. The debate between pro-choice and pro-life has been reignited. This report has more.
Komisji Sprawiedliwości i Praw Człowieka oraz Komisji Zdrowia zechce podnieść rękę i nacisnąć przycisk.
September 2016. The Conservative Polish Parliament votes to further tighten the country's already strict abortion laws.
Głosowało 418 posłów, za głosowało 230.
The vote pushes a near total ban on abortion in the devoutly Catholic nation. Tens of thousands of Polish women hit the streets against the decision. The protests continue for over a month. The movement forces the Polish parliament to withdraw its decision. The ban on abortion gets rejected. 4 years on, it's a déjà vu moment for Polish women. The country's constitutional tribunal has struck down one of the most common legal grounds for pregnancy termination. Poland's Chief Justice has ruled that abortion due to fetal defects is unconstitutional. Polish citizens have hit the streets of Warsaw again, only this time they are not on the same page. On one hand, pro-life activists are rallying in support of the court's ruling. On the other, pro-choice activists are protesting the court's decision. And they are growing in strength. On Sunday morning, they clashed with the police. On Sunday night, they blocked all routes to the presidential palace. By Monday, the protests had turned into a family affair. Thousands of activists, along with their parents, disrupted church services across Poland. In the western city of Poznan, protesters held banners in front of the altar that read, "We are sick of this." In the southern city of Katowice, a 7,000-strong crowd of mostly women gathered in front of the cathedral, chanting, "This is war." Poland is home to 38 million people. Fewer than 2,000 legal abortions are set to take place annually. But women's groups estimate that up to 200,000 procedures are performed illegally or abroad. They say the court's ruling could pave the way for the Polish government to put a ban on abortion irrespective of the reasons.
My imagination is not enough to get my head around the situation in which I am forced to give birth to a child who is going to die. This is a trauma for everyone. For 9 months, you'll be carrying a child with serious genetic defects, which you know is not going to stay alive. This is such a trauma for a woman, for her whole family, and everyone around her. I wish maybe in 20, 30, 40 or 50 years that the next generations have easy access to abortion.
The verdict is final. It cannot be repealed. The public anger is palpable. It is set to grow. The Human Rights Commissioner of the Council of Europe has called it a sad day for women's rights. The debate between pro-life and pro-choice is set to reignite across the whole of Europe. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
The race to the White House would be nearing its conclusion in a few days from now. November 3rd is the big election day. 57 million Americans have voted already. The campaigning is in the final leg. Halloween time. On Sunday night, the presidential palace opened its doors to tiny trick-or-treaters. The president and the first lady played host to hundreds of superheroes, ghosts, fairies, unicorns, goblins, even a miniature version of themselves. Look at these images. Trump and Melania posing with their tiny lookalikes at the White House. The US president could not have been happier. He could not resist smiling. He had a really nice weekend. A few hours before this Halloween bash, Trump was signing pumpkins at an orchard in the state of Maine. It'll be on eBay tonight, he joked as he autographed them. Meanwhile, in New York City, there was a different kind of Halloween playing out, the kind that has lasted all summer. Protests and violence. Once again on the streets of New York, a skirmish broke out between supporters and opponents of Donald Trump on Sunday afternoon. It began as a verbal dispute. It soon turned physical. There were punches thrown, eggs and expletives hurled. All of this happened in the heart of Times Square as some New Yorkers clashed. A few miles away in Brooklyn, some others were busy voting, hoping to ensure that America is united once again.
It's important for this election because a lot is at stake for a lot of people in America, particularly African American people. So we want to make sure that we do our part to make sure that our voices are heard, our votes are counted, and that the next 4 years is not a representation of what we had these last 4 years.
Speaking of the next 4 years, Donald Trump has cast his ballot. He went to Palm Beach on Saturday to vote at the West Palm Library. Who did the president vote for? Listen to this.
I voted for a guy named Trump.
Thank you very much, everybody.
A guy named Trump, he says. What about a guy named Biden? What is he up to? Well, he's hit the campaign trail once again. Over the weekend, Biden campaigned in several battleground states, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Georgia, Michigan. He says he's more confident about America's future than he's ever been, and that Americans can do it together. The US president says America is already doing great. Take a look.
You know, I'm more optimistic about America's future than I've been since I've been involved in politics. We're the only country in the world that's come out of every crisis stronger than we went in. There's not a damn thing America can't do when we decide to do it together.
But it's a choice between a Trump super boom and a Biden lockdown. Did you hear him the other night? It's going to be a cold, dark winter. Very inspiring guy. This is very inspiring. Whoa. I even said, whoa. Whoa. No, we got to have spirit, our country. You know, we're coming back. We're rounding the turn. We're doing great. Our numbers are incredible.
And we're not done with the United States. A sequel of 2006 comedy film Borat is taking America by storm. The film is aimed at causing maximum embarrassment to the Trump administration and its allies. The plot revolves around Borat, played by actor Sacha Baron Cohen, trying to get his daughter married off Vice President Mike Pence and Trump's close ally, Rudy Giuliani. In a recent interview, Trump attacked the actor. He called him creepy and a phony guy. The actor has responded and his statement is going viral. Let me quote from his tweet. Donald, he says, I appreciate the free publicity for Borat. I admit I don't find you funny either. But yet the whole world laughs at you. I'm always looking for people to play racist buffoons, and you'll need a job after 20th January. Let's talk. Will Borat's prediction come true? We'll have to wait and see soon enough now. Meanwhile, here's something else that is making headlines, at least trending on social media in the US. Fake Melania. A recent photograph of the US First Lady has triggered this trend. It has left many convinced that a body double was standing up for Melania Trump. The bizarre rumor has reignited the debate over political body doubles, which, by the way, are a practice more common than you would imagine. Take a look.
This photograph was clicked on October 22nd. It shows Melania and Donald Trump boarding Marine One in the White House. Reportedly taken when the two were on their way to the last presidential debate. Melania can be spotted wearing large sunglasses and sporting a huge grin. What if we told you that the lady in the picture is not Melania Trump? It is her body double. Twitter is alight with speculation. While some have dissected the placement of Melania's ring, others have closely examined her nose. Most interestingly, it is the lady's flashy grin that captured attention. Twitterati is convinced that it does not match Melania's subtle smile. Many suggested that the US First Lady has distanced herself from her husband. They say she uses a body double to wriggle out of public engagements, even claiming that Trump hired an actress to cover the campaign trail. But the rumor is not new. The fake Melania hashtag has been around since 2017, Trump's first year in office. Be it leaving Air Force One or the Columbus Air Force Base in Ohio, the fake Melania theory has been doing the rounds for long. And this isn't the first fake either. Flip the pages of body double history and you'll find Queen Elizabeth, Ella Slack from the Isle of Man, has spent 30 years only to play stand-in during rehearsals for televised royal engagements. More recently, Kim Jong-un was captured chin-wagging with his doppelganger. Ironically, at a time when the North Korean leader was rumored to be dead. Be it official or personal, body doubles have multiple roles. In 2017, the Nigerian president was reportedly replaced by Jubri, a Sudanese man. This was during Muhammadu Buhari's long medical treatment in the UK. Even the Russian president has not been spared by rumor mills. Vladimir Putin's possible use of a body double for security reasons has been much talked about. Almost as much as his Soviet-era senior, Joseph Stalin. Apparently, a body double named Rashid attended meetings on behalf of Stalin. History has many more documented examples, like General Bernard Montgomery. The British general found a dead ringer in an Australian actor during World War II. Tyrants like Adolf Hitler and Saddam Hussein are known to have had a roster of impersonators. Political body doubles are rare. They are effective only if the resemblance is impeccable. Perhaps that's why not much is known about them. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
South Korea's youth have two options: join the army or go to prison. It is among a handful of countries that has a policy of forced military service. South Korea. But recently, the laws have been relaxed. People who refuse to serve the military now have the option of public service. But guess where they're being deployed for this work? To jail.
In South Korea, the choice was always clear. Serve in the military or be branded a criminal. South Korea has a policy of compulsory military service. Failing to serve means going to prison. 20,000 people have been imprisoned over this rule, some of them subjected to brutal treatment. But not anymore. South Korea has announced a major change in its military draft policy. Alternative service that can be performed instead of military duty, people who refuse to serve will still be in prison, but as workers, not inmates. They will cook for the prisoners, clean the prison walls, and serve as assistants to the prison doctor. But more importantly, they will remain free men with no criminal records. Right now, prison work is the only option, but gradually more forms of public service are expected to be added, like working in nursing homes or as firefighters. Military service is sacred in South Korea. All able-bodied men are required to serve for at least 21 months. It's considered the best way to counter its rival, North Korea. But since 1949, at least 400,000 people have refused to serve. A majority of them are Jehovah's Witnesses, a Christian group that does not believe in war and violence. While this is a historic moment in South Korea, the battle is only half won. 3 years of prison service is still a lot, especially in a country that prides itself as a liberal democracy. But South Korean politicians have an excuse. They say if the alternative is too easy, the youth will evade the draft in large numbers. The fact is, South Korea does need a large standing army. The threat from North Korea is ever present. Pyongyang claims to have more than 1 million soldiers in its ranks. South Korea is struggling to keep up, especially with birth rates plummeting in the last few decades. Draft dodgers in South Korea often become easy targets, like pop star Yoo Sung-jeon. He was accused of dodging military service in 2002 by becoming a US citizen. The price he had to pay was his career. South Korea is not alone in mandatory military service. In Israel, the men must serve at least 3 years in the army, and women 2 years. In Syria, military service is a must for all men. Government workers who evade it end up losing their job. There are also reports of rigorous jail terms. Even Switzerland has similar rules. The Swiss endorsed compulsory military service thrice in 3 separate referendums, but people do have the option of civilian service. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
Let's talk about yesterday's IPL match. Mumbai Indians were taking on Rajasthan Royals. It was a high-scoring thriller. For Mumbai, it was Indian cricketer Hardik Pandya who made the runs. He scored a 50. But instead of raising his bat, Hardik did something different. He went down on one knee and raised his hand in a power salute, the symbol of the global Black Lives Matter movement. It was the first time BLM featured in the Indian Premier League. How has the public responded? Here's a report.
Down on one knee, his fist raised in a Black Power salute. This is Indian cricketer Hardik Pandya, the first player in the Indian Premier League to publicly endorse the Black Lives Matter movement. It is a gesture that is becoming increasingly common in sports leagues. Players have been doing it at the NBA, the NFL, and the Premier League. Sportspersons have become ambassadors of the Black Lives Matter movement. It was no different when cricket resumed after the coronavirus lockdown. England was taking on the West Indies. Players from both sides took a knee at the start of the match. Cricket had joined the global campaign, but its participation was short-lived. The practice was discontinued in the series that followed. Neither England nor the visiting teams from Australia and Pakistan took a knee, much to the disgust of West Indies legend Michael Holding. The Australian team said education around racism was more important than on-field gestures and protests. The English Cricket Board agreed. Cut to August and the big announcement is made. The IPL 2020 will go ahead. Many saw this as a great chance to spread the message of Black Lives Matter. After all, the IPL boasts of a diverse roster, plus some of the tournament's biggest stars are of African descent. But this was not to be. The IPL was being staged away from India in the United Arab Emirates. The BCCI's priority was clear, keeping the tournament COVID-19 free. Black Lives Matter did not find currency in the Indian Premier League. It was an issue raised by West Indies captain Jason Holder. He plays for the IPL franchise from Hyderabad. Last week, he said this. To be honest, I haven't had one conversation up here around it. Sometimes it seems it has gone unnoticed, which is a sad thing. I guess it is for us to re-highlight the importance of it for people to understand what is happening in the world. Holder's concern has been addressed, albeit a bit too late. Hardik Pandya's gesture came in the 45th match of the tournament. It was welcomed by stand-in captain Kieron Pollard in the pavilion. He responded with a power salute of his own. The reaction on social media has been largely positive, but some have called out Pandya for his hypocrisy. They have a simple question: why is Pandya championing a global cause while maintaining silence on atrocities back home in India? Symbolism catches eyes. The question is, what next? Sports has helped bring the spotlight on Black Lives Matter. But the time for symbolism has passed. Action is the need of the hour. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.